46-year-old Derek Calloway, an attorney in Macon, Georgia with 18 years of experience in real estate, recounts the turning point in his life. The day his wife abandoned him at a gas station in Birmingham, Alabama. Despite her betrayal, he initially convinced himself it was a misunderstanding. However, as time passed and evidence piled up against him, even he could no longer ignore the truth. The individuals who almost shattered him weren't adversaries in courtrooms, but those he shared meals with, those who slept under his roof, and those who claimed to be family. This narrative unfolds when Derek decides he has had enough of making excuses and enduring humiliation. I assure you, by the conclusion, you'll comprehend why the evening my mother-in-law struck me in front of 30 individuals at a downtown Macon restaurant turned out to be the most beneficial event in my life. The revelation that awaited them upon their return altered everything. Before we proceed, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and share your viewing location with me in the comments. If this narrative resonates with you, pass it along to someone who might benefit from hearing it. Now let's delve back into where this all began. It wasn't about the dinner or the slap. Those events occurred later. This journey started on a March Saturday, approximately 14 months before everything fell apart. At that time, Camille and I had been married for 9 years. I feel it's important to clarify something about her before I describe her, as this tale is not meant to disparage a woman. It's about truth. Camille was captivating in a manner that would halt conversations mid-sentence. Standing tall, possessing dark eyes, and that unique laugh reserved for select occasions, it felt like winning something when she let it out. I fell for her during a law conference in Atlanta, where she represented her company in a contract dispute, and I was the opposing counsel. Despite being opponents, by the second day, she was the only person in the room I longed to engage with. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. I took her to Savannah, to a quaint riverside restaurant where candles flicker in the windows at dusk, and you can hear the water flowing beneath the floorboards. I carried the ring in my jacket pocket for 4 hours before summoning the courage to ask. She accepted before I finished my question. What I didn't grasp then was that Camille wasn't alone. She arrived with an entourage. Her mother, Rhonda, aged 61, had never encountered anyone she loved who had ever said no to her. The woman occupied any space she stepped into not due to her warmth or charm, but rather her assertive nature. Her character revolved around an approach I'd term aggressive generosity, offering grand, costly, ostentatious gestures, and then repeatedly bringing up these actions at the most inconvenient moments for as long as life lasted. My attempts to connect with Camille's closest friends Trish and Nadine spanned over a decade. Trish, Camille's college roommate, was sarcastic, competitive, and skilled at disguising backhanded compliments as high praise. Compared to Trish, Nadine was more reserved but strategic. She had a knack for sowing doubt subtly in conversations, then observing its growth. Together, they formed an isolated unit with their unique language, inside jokes, and shared past. Since the start of my marriage, I felt more like a recurring character in their tale than the protagonist in my own. Nevertheless, I endured. That's the straightforward truth. I tolerated the situation for 9 years. I was accommodating when Rhonda appeared unexpectedly. I remained amicable despite Trish's petty remarks. I navigated delicately when Nadine's advice to Camille about our finances and travel plans invariably took hold. I convinced myself this was what it entailed to be a husband, that you bear certain burdens because you cherish someone and their loved ones are included in the equation. Then came March. Camille's firm hosted a regional conference in Birmingham. 2 days, 1 night, a pleasant hotel. She asked if I wished to accompany her for the weekend, turning it into a mini vacation. I agreed. Trish and Nadine were also attending, so we would be 4, an arrangement I was not enthusiastic about. However, once more I adapted. The conference concluded on Saturday afternoon. We dined downtown. The meal was delicious, the talk flowed smoothly. For a while it truly seemed like the marriage I'd always dreamt of. Camille was content, carefree, chuckling at my humor, resting her hand on my arm. Trish and Nadine were tolerable save for their private moments with Camille. We returned to the hotel by 9. The following Sunday morning, I woke up at 7, heading to the hotel gym. I left Camille sleeping and ventured downstairs for a workout session that lasted approximately 45 minutes. After showering in the lobby, I fetched a cup of coffee and ascended back to our room. It was empty, save for her suitcase which had mysteriously disappeared from our quarters. The note on the pillow read, We're making an early departure. Trish had to avoid traffic. Your belongings are at the reception desk. I reread that note thrice. I approached the reception desk and they returned my car key and a hotel bill, already paid in full. They handed me my luggage, which was kept behind the counter. In the Birmingham morning, I stepped outside and found myself in the parking lot, gradually grasping the fact that my wife had departed from the hotel, collected her belongings and friends, and journeyed back to Georgia without me. I want you to ponder this scenario for a while. It's not about seeking your sympathy, though I can't deny it stung. I urge you to contemplate this, as I need you to comprehend the psychological reasoning behind my subsequent actions. I reached out to her. After 3 rings, she answered cheerfully, bordering on amusement. "Hello, you were still asleep and Trish really had to get back. You have your keys, don't you?" They hadn't been returned at the desk. I confirmed they were still there. I agreed with her plan. I consented to returning alone. I didn't reveal my internal turmoil, a frosty, illuminating rage I had never encountered before in my life. The kind that doesn't explode, rather it settles. I made the 5-hour drive back to Macon by myself. Outside Anniston, I made a brief stop for fuel and spent about 20 minutes in the parking lot, sipping water and scrolling through my phone. With 17 years of divorce and property dispute cases swirling in my mind, I unexpectedly began analyzing my own life through a professional lens. Upon reaching our home in Macon that Sunday afternoon, Camille's car was already parked there. Trish and she were on the back porch drinking wine. Nadine had departed. Upon entering the house, they looked up at me as if I had just returned from an unexpected journey. In truthfulness, I wish to share this part of my narrative because it is a point where many men falter, either exploding or crumbling, yet I neither blew up nor collapsed. Instead, I placed my bag, fetched a glass of water, and seated myself at the kitchen table, contemplating for quite some time, reflecting on the realization that I had merely arrived home. Between Birmingham and Macon on the highway, something had changed. It wasn't my affection for Camille that had altered, not just yet, but my patience for being controlled seemed to have hit a threshold. It wasn't a sudden, flamboyant realization, more like a well-fitted key clicking into place. I didn't vocalize it that night or the next day. Instead, I went to work on Monday, did my job, returned home, and maintained a courteous, attentive demeanor. I was watching now, not to gather evidence or consider repercussions. I was merely, after 9 years, finally perceiving what had been in plain sight. During the subsequent 6 weeks, I observed a great deal. I noticed that Camille would consult Trish before discussing significant matters with me. This included decisions about refinancing our home, queries regarding a new job offer from her company, and handling a tricky family situation involving her niece. The information trickled down to me, initially reaching Trish, then Nadine, and eventually concluding with me. I noticed that Rhonda phoned 3 or 4 times weekly, and afterward Camille would seem detached for the remainder of the day, a behavior I had previously attributed to stress or exhaustion, but now recognized as something else entirely. Those phone calls seemed to be shaping Camille's viewpoint about her marriage, and by extension me. When Camille chuckled at Trish's anecdotes regarding her husband Warren, tales that invariably presented Warren as slow, clueless, or comically hapless in some domestic scenario, I began to question how frequently I might have been a subject of the stories she shared about me. As a real estate lawyer who brings in a decent income and works 60 hours a week when necessary, while also coaching youth baseball on Saturday mornings. For 9 years of marriage, I never missed an anniversary and always ensured groceries were stocked when it was my turn to shop. I'm not flawless, but I've shown up consistently. However, the people significant in my wife's life had subtly, gradually redefined my actions as ordinary, unexceptional, just typical husband behavior with no debts owed. I began documenting incidents, not to plan anything. As an attorney, I organized thoughts by writing them down, dates, observations, patterns. Events from the past I previously overlooked but now understood better. Documentation was not a strategy, it was a path to clarity, useful as it turned out to be. The dinner occurred on a Friday night in late May. Rhonda was in town for the week, which she does about 3 or 4 times annually. Staying in our house, one I purchased and selected myself. The mortgage payments I took care of entirely, as Camille's income predominantly contributed to her investment accounts. An agreement I willingly consented to, believing in our mutual future construction. Rhonda, however, did not merely dislike me. Rather, she harbored a deep-seated contempt towards me for almost a decade, masked by courteous politeness. She regarded Camille as marrying beneath her, not from a financial perspective, understanding my earnings, but socially, culturally, and according to Rhonda's personal standards of the man Camille should marry. I never directly challenged this sentiment because Camille always smoothed it over, finding ways to make me question myself. Until the dinner at Sullivan's, a downtown Macon restaurant offering Southern-style fine dining with white tablecloths. List of excellent bourbon establishments. A setting where the ambience is cozy and patrons are elegantly attired. Reservation for 6 was made by Camille. Attending were her parents, Rhonda and Gerald, Camille herself, and Trish along with her husband Warren. I found Gerald agreeable. Retired engineer from Columbia, South Carolina, he was a subtly humorous man who cherished quality steak and had mastered the art of harmoniously sharing space with Rhonda, doing so in a quiet, graceful manner. Our interactions were always amicable. The night progressed smoothly at first. Drinks were ordered, menus perused, discussions about Gerald's recent fishing excursion and Warren's new vehicle ensued. However, Rhonda exhibited a specific demeanor I recognized as feigned kindness, characterized by excessive friendliness that demanded an audience and implied reciprocity in the form of social debt. She praised the restaurant as if she had selected it, and her interactions with the waiter exuded an air of authority, suggesting she was acting as host rather than guest. 40 minutes into our meal, I needed to use the restroom. Upon returning, I stumbled slightly between 2 chairs. Unluckily, my hand brushed against the strap of Rhonda's purse on her seat, causing a spill of her red wine onto the sleeve of her dress. Apologizing immediately, I attempted to steady her glass and repeated my apologies. However, what followed next happened swiftly yet feels prolonged in recollection. Rhonda stood up, slapped me across the left side of my face with surprising force, silencing the nearby table. She then spoke calmly but icily. "How dare you touch me, you revolting man? Clean up your mess and leave." The table remained hushed after this incident. Gerald stood motionless. Trish and Warren were speechless. I hesitated, placing a hand on my face, not from physical pain, though it was painful, but from the unexpectedness of the recent events. Then Camille spoke. "I will forever remember her words as they signaled the end of our marriage, not the slap, not the desertion in Birmingham, not anything else. It was this: apologize to her or depart, not to Rhonda." To me, my wife demanded an apology for being slapped in a restaurant or departure from the premises. I looked at Camille for a prolonged moment. I looked at Gerald, unable to maintain eye contact. I looked at Rhonda, who wore the expression of a woman who had just emerged victorious. I placed my napkin on the table. I retrieved my coat from my chair. I murmured softly, "Good night," and I exited Sullivan's. I remained in my car in the parking lot for roughly 10 minutes. On my right side, a warmth unfolded. The rhythmic hum of the city street resonated. It was a typical Friday evening in downtown Macon, filled with people shifting between eateries and music emanating from an unknown source. Life continued as usual, oblivious to the recent event. I returned home. What transpires over the subsequent 3 hours is crucial to relay, for this isn't a narrative of anger, but one of lucidity. The choice I made upon arriving home was neither emotional nor impulsive. Rather, it was the most thoughtful, calculated decision I've ever made as an adult. I retreated to my study and dialed Pamela, a renowned family law attorney whom I hold in high regard personally and who had indeed assisted several of my clients over the years. I shared with her what took place, not just that night, but the series of incidents over time. The trip to Birmingham, the persistent pattern I'd only recently recognized, the slap, Camille's reaction. Pamela asked, "Derek, for how long have you been prepared to undertake this?" I responded, "Perhaps a few months, but I didn't want to acknowledge it." She mentioned, "I'll initiate the paperwork on Monday. However, you should first ascertain your financial standing." I stated, "I am aware of my finances. Given that I am a real estate attorney, I understand the workings of assets, the concept of marital and separate property, required documentation, movable and immovable assets, and have not been strategizing but rather paying attention. In those weeks of attending to details, I had already started comprehending the outline of what was approaching. Next, I contacted my brother Tyrell. He is 4 years senior to me, resides in Savannah, and is one of the least dramatic individuals I've encountered. I shared with him what transpired. He replied, "You know your course of action. I'll arrive tomorrow morning." The remainder of the night was spent organizing. I consolidated financial records, account statements, documents related to the house. I methodically captured the house's interior through a room-by-room photo shoot to document its contents. I penned an extensive, time-stamped summary of the evening at Sullivan's, listing all attendees as witnesses, which I emailed to myself for documentation purposes. I didn't pack Camille's belongings or disturbed items that weren't mine. I am not a vengeful man, but I am a prudent one. Later, I headed to the guest room instead of sleeping in my bedroom due to Rhonda's expected return. I managed approximately 4 hours of sleep. Upon Tyrell's arrival on Saturday morning, we conversed in the kitchen and I led him through all details. He listened attentively, as he typically does without interrupting. After my explanation, he asked, "What can you expect from me?" To which I replied, "I need your help moving some items, not tonight. Tonight is crucial, but next week." He nodded in agreement. In the morning, I made 2 other crucial calls. The first was another call to Pamela for initiating the legal separation procedure under Georgia laws. Since Georgia is a no-fault divorce state, Pamela suggested that documenting events, like what could be verified by witnesses at the restaurant, would hold importance in determining specific assets. While I won't delve into the intricacies of the law here, it's worth mentioning that consistent mortgage payments made solely by one spouse from a separate account over 9 years can significantly influence property rights in Georgia. In essence, the house I had selected and paid for would remain mine. The second call was to the apartment complex manager on Riverside Drive in Macon, where I had a connection, having represented its owner in a business transaction 2 years back. Since I had continued to keep tabs on the building due to referring clients to it during difficult periods, I decided to secure an apartment there. Last Saturday, I had occupied the apartment I'd visited a week prior, and I was composed as Camille, Rhonda, Trish, and Warren arrived. In the living room, I sat with a notepad and a cup of coffee, my calmness authentic, not feigned coldness or detachment. The decision I'd made earlier had stripped me of any need to steel myself against anything. Initially, Rhonda, upon entering, seemed taken aback by my presence. She likely anticipated either a submissive spouse poised for self-degradation or an absent one altogether. However, she found something else. A man quietly occupying his own home, emitting the steady vibe of one who has completed their mental deliberations. Camille followed Rhonda in and halted upon seeing me, to which I responded, "We need to discuss things, not tonight. Tonight, I suggest you cherish your last evening with your mother, yet tomorrow, once she departs, we will discuss matters between us." This is what Camille mentioned earlier regarding last night. She wishes to clarify things. I replied, "Tomorrow." Rhonda interjected, asserting her presence in the room. I requested, "Rhonda, could you please step aside from our private conversation between my spouse and me?" She was taken aback by this response, as I had rarely challenged her during our 9-year relationship. I retrieved my notepad and proceeded to my office. The dialogue I shared with Camille on Sunday, following Rhonda's departure, was the most straightforward we have ever exchanged in our 9 years of marriage. It was not an argument. There were instances when Camille wept, and I remained with her through it all. I neither attempted to resolve nor diminish her feelings, but I gave her honesty. I shared with her the significance of Birmingham beyond just an event, representing a recurring pattern I should have identified years earlier. I discussed the years where she preferred consulting Trish and Nadine over me, and the instance of Rhonda in our home, her derogatory remarks about me, the incident at Sullivan's, and her reaction. She expressed regret. She didn't intend to. I stated, "Camille, she struck me." A prolonged pause. She replied, "I should have intervened." I responded, "Indeed, you should have, and when you failed to do so, it told me something about my position in this marriage, and I must be truthful with you about my next steps." I informed her that I had hired Pamela. I disclosed that I had already communicated with a property management firm and would soon move into a separate residence. I made it clear that nothing in the house would be taken unless it belonged to me, assuring fairness and transparency throughout the process while expecting the same from her. After a lengthy pause, Camille responded, "You orchestrated this." To which I replied, "I've made decisions, there's a distinction." She countered, "When?" I explained, "It's been brewing for some time. Birmingham hinted at it. Last night sealed the deal." However, what I didn't express but was still accurate was this. The planning wasn't about retribution. I don't have that nature. The planning was about safeguarding myself, an aspect I had neglected for nearly a decade and decided I would no longer ignore. I moved into the Riverside Drive apartment the following Friday with Terrell's help. We brought my clothes, books, personal items, office equipment, the toolbox my father left me, and the bedroom TV, which I had bought. I departed the house in an immaculate state, leaving Camille's possessions undisturbed. However, what she found missing within 48 hours of my departure was the regular inflow from our shared account, which supported our household expenses. Let me clarify this point to ensure you understand that it was a legitimate and legally sound separation of our financial entanglements, not intended as an action against Camille, but as a necessary step towards individual financial independence. For 9 years, my salary served as the primary source of income for our household. By mutual agreement, Camille's income was invested independently. I found this arrangement fair in the context of our marriage. But separating requires setting up separate financial lives, and Pamela had been explicit about the immediate actions required. The joint account remains active, but my contributions to it ceased. On Monday morning, Camille called me. She stated, "Derek, there's an issue with the account." I replied, "I'm aware. Your lawyer will be contacting your attorney about the financial transition." She retorted, "This is severe." I countered, "The incident at Sullivan's was equally intense." My response mirrors the gravity of the situation. After a brief pause, she said, "You've altered." I responded, "Camille, I was forced to leave after your mother struck me in a restaurant and you demanded an apology. I chose to depart. I'm still departing." That's not a change, it's a decision. The following events are significant to the narrative. Over the ensuing 4 months, several unexpected occurrences transpired. First, Trish. Approximately 3 weeks after my departure, I received a message from Warren. Warren and I had shared a cordial relationship, stemming from our mutual involvement in the same social circle, which necessitated maintaining a basic cooperative truce. "Did we arrange for lunch today?" We convened at a downtown Macon barbecue restaurant, and Warren confided in me something I will forever be thankful he shared. He stated, "I want you to understand that I witnessed the event, and I wanted you to know that I informed Trish that Rhonda's actions were unjustified and Camille's words were even more reprehensible." He glanced at his meal briefly. "Derek, you deserved better treatment than what transpired, and I'm sorry I didn't speak up at the table." I replied. "Why didn't you?" He responded, "I've been withholding words for quite some time now." His gaze conveyed a message that was clear to me. The complexities of his marriage with Trish were not something I intended to speculate about. However, I recognized the subtext. I said, "Warren, you don't have to apologize for another person's behavior." He agreed. "I realize that. I merely wanted you to know someone observed it. That lunch held more significance for me than I can adequately articulate." The subsequent incident involved Gerald. On a Saturday in July, Gerald, who hails from Columbia, South Carolina, called me from a Vineville Avenue coffee shop. He started the call with, "This might seem odd, but I wanted to talk to you." I replied, "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Gerald, known for his restraint and succinctness, conveyed in approximately 12 sentences that the incident at Sullivan's marked the climax of a years-long pattern he had observed and couldn't prevent. He mentioned that he had finally discussed with Rhonda how she treated me, and that he wasn't sure what the outcome would be but felt it was necessary to express. He added, "I want you to understand that you were always a good husband to my daughter. Rhonda made your life more difficult than necessary, and Camille allowed her. That's not on you." I thanked him, and we finished our coffee before he headed back to South Carolina. In the parking lot following his departure, I allowed myself to experience emotions I had previously suppressed, not resentment, but rather a sense of sorrow. It was for the marriage I longed for, the 9 years of striving, and the man who made the last stand at the restaurant, the only boundary left to establish. 7 months post-move-out, the divorce was finalized. Georgia law mandates a waiting period, and asset discussions took time, but it transpired without court battles, which I appreciate. The house remained mine due to financial records, while Camille kept her significant investment accounts. We equally divided our joint account. Pamela deemed it one of the more amicable high-asset splits she's managed. Unknown is what Camille's life encompasses now. We communicate solely through lawyers when necessary. I sincerely wish her wellness, genuinely speaking. I bear no resentment towards Camille. Instead, I've gained a clearer understanding, which I wish I had grasped years ago. 2 months into our process, Rhonda issued a written apology to Camille's attorney regarding the inappropriate physical contact. Her lawyer termed it as acknowledgement of wrongdoing. My response was a brief confirmation sent via Pamela. That was the end of it. Now, here's what I've come to realize. Over 14 months since our encounter in Birmingham's parking lot, which marked my realization that something had to change. I now understand that perseverance is not synonymous with love. Love is indeed generous, accommodating, and adaptable. However, it does not demand the tolerance of disrespect perpetually, under the pretense that the relationship deserves protection. Eventually, what one safeguards is not the bond, but rather the facade, the conventional narrative about one's life. The toughest ordeal wasn't the slap, nor the legal proceedings, nor breaking the news of my divorce to my father. The most challenging moment was in the car on our return from Birmingham when I realized what I was about to confront. This was because it implied acknowledging that I had been aware for a while and had opted for comfort over truth. I am certain that the apartment on Riverside Drive is the tranquil abode I have ever inhabited. On Saturday mornings, I continue coaching youth baseball, unbeknownst to those kids about the incident in the restaurant on 2nd Street. Standing on that field constitutes the best part of my week. And I am convinced, more than anything else in my life, that when I left Sullivan's, it wasn't the point at which my life disintegrated. Instead, it marked the beginning of constructing the life I should have lived all along. What resonated deeply within me about Derek's narrative was not the slap. Remaining in that Birmingham parking lot wasn't the issue. What truly troubled him was the realization that he had been aware of something amiss for years, yet found various excuses to remain silent about it. I believe many people behave this way. We tend to label it as patience or maturity. However, at times, it is merely the fear of acknowledging that the life we've constructed isn't the one we are truly living. Derek didn't explode. Instead, he clarified matters. That's the point I want you to ponder over. Share your thoughts in the comments. What's one thing you continue to tolerate despite knowing it shouldn't be so? I read all your comments carefully. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you still waiting for? I'll see you in the next post.